We are a B-47 combat crew. Tomorrow we're scheduled to fly a routine formation and refueling mission. We'll spend today then planning our mission and preparing for the flight. The navigator makes out his Form 1 with care, while the co-pilot figures the weight and balance and takeoff data. I supervise their activities and coordinate refueling and formation plans. The crew works well together. Our work completed and the day drawing to a close, we leave to get the crew rest prescribed by SAC Regulation 6219. With at least 8 hours of good sound sleep, and as directed by the Commander 2nd Air Force in supplementing SAC Regulation 6219, no alcoholic beverages for at least 18 hours before takeoff, we'll be in top physical condition for the flight. The crew chief arrives the next morning, 2 hours before aircrew stations time. He's an old-timer with many years' experience on the B-47. He's a hard worker and keeps his airplane in good condition. He'll check accumulator preloads, put the oxygen on buildup, and correct any minor discrepancies he may find before the aircrew arrives at the aircraft. While the co-pilot and I draw and load the personal equipment, the navigator gets his time hack. With the equipment carefully loaded on the PE vehicle, we depart for the aircraft early enough to have the equipment unloaded and the crew in position at stations time. The crew chief has completed his pre-flight and minor maintenance, and the aircraft is ready for flight. A careful stations inspection is essential. Each crew member must have all his professional equipment, and flying clothing must be clean and serviceable. We check for dosimeter, SAC pass, hunting knife, and properly fitting boots, as well as the items indicated on the checklist. We make sure that all crew members have a current time hack, the Form 781 is completed, and emergency procedures are briefed. We brief oxygen discipline, review the mission, and give pre-flight instructions. There'll be a split exterior pre-flight, with the navigator calling off the checklist to me and the crew chief going with the co-pilot. The interior inspection was without incident, and the exterior pre-flight is underway. Every item on the checklist is covered. Tiny pieces of safety wire or tools left in the engine air intakes can cause major damage. A careful check is made to ensure that no foreign objects are present. Meanwhile, the co-pilot is going on with his portion of the pre-flight. He checks the boost pumps to make sure that motor vents are dry and that the maximum leakage on sump drains is 4 drops in 6 minutes. The brake and approach chutes are checked to determine proper loading and serviceable condition. On the approach chute, we make sure that the micro switch is depressed, that the pins are not bent, that the coupling is connected, the release mechanism operational, and the swaged ball fitted in the door. When the door is closed, the leading edge must be flush within 1 skin thickness. The switch guard down, the circuit breaker pulled, and the access door closed. To make our scheduled takeoff time, we're now on board and starting engines. The crew chief is acting as fire guard, and number 4 starts normally. Number 5 is next, and we monitor EGTs carefully to prevent hot starts. All seems to be normal. The remainder of the engines are started, D-ring lanyards are connected, the alarm system is checked, and we prepare to taxi. We begin to taxi, checking the hydraulics and flight instruments. We must remember to zero the accelerometer before takeoff. We taxi slowly and carefully. The crew chief is anxious to maintain his 0 ground abort rate. This is a routine flight and creates no anxiety on anyone's part. The exterior looks satisfactory before line-up. The flaps are down, flaperons check, and we take the runway. The fuel panel is set for takeoff. At full throttle, the engine instruments look good. We're ready to fire the water. We have water on all 6, the EGTs, the fuel flow, RPM, oil pressures are okay, and we're releasing brakes. The aircraft accelerates smoothly down the runway. The aircraft commander should always double-check that the before takeoff checklist has been fully accomplished. We break ground at the calculated point and begin our climb to join the formation. The co-pilot flies the aircraft while I unhook my D-ring lanyard and accomplish the after-takeoff cleanup. Each aircraft commander should know what other aircraft will be in the formation. And now, after the formation has assembled, we head for our tanker rendezvous. The Rendezvous and pre-descent checklist is accomplished. The tanker is contacted and we begin the trip down. The airspeed 330 knots indicated, oxygen 100%. We bottom out directly behind the tanker. At our signal, he unstows the boom. We move into observation position. With both tanker and receiver ready for contact, we move in and the boom rams home. The tanker flies a steady platform and we stay in the center of the envelope with proper boom extension. It's important that the receiver pilot avoid tenseness. Small corrections are all that's necessary. The co-pilot makes sure that the fuel is received in the proper sequence, which will best affect the aircraft CG. On heavyweight refuelings, at the end of fuel transfer approaches, the heavy condition sometimes necessitates lowering additional flaps to stabilize the receiver. If the speed schedule cannot be met in level flight, it's sometimes necessary to begin a gradual descent. We disconnect upon completion of fuel transfer. It's a good idea to practice dry contacts if possible, but sometimes the boom operator has had enough. With the post-refueling checklist completed, we clear the tanker and start our climb. Having burned off our fuel to landing weight of 125,000 pounds, we accomplish the descent checklist, get clearance from Miami Center to approach frequency, and are cleared to start our penetration. Gear is lowered using the drag gear switch first, and a normal descent at 270 knots begins. Switching to GCA frequency in the penetration turn, we complete the before landing checklist, including reconnecting the D-ring lanyard and set up the final approach speed schedule. With the hard strut configuration in particular, the aircraft must be landed delicately. And so another routine training mission has been completed safely. And now a critique of the mission by the wing commander.
Off we go, into the wild blue yonder, riding high.